Welcome to the archive. On each episode of the podcast, we sit down with an exciting guest who is either a builder, a founder, or a dreamer in the ARIF ecosystem and in the perma web at large. And in this particular episode, our guest is going to be Phil Mataras, also known as Velenarios. He's the founder and CEO of Permanent Data Solution. He has been an ARIF builder at the core, from starting with building the ArDrive app to now developing the first permanent cloud, which is the ARIO network. With no further ado, let's jump in this chat and hear more about his story within the PermaWeb ecosystem. On today's episode of The Archive, we're going to receive Phil Mataras, also known as Velenarios, who is the founder and CEO at Permanent Data Solution. Phil, happy to have you today.
Hey, Marty, happy to be on. It's great to finally meet you. Love your work that you've been doing in ArWeave, especially ARIO, Wayfinder. You know, you've been an inspiration for me with some of the Wayfinder stuff. So yeah, excited to chat with you today.
Thank you very much. And also, just before we get in, I think and this is no joke, I've repeated like more than 50 times to how to pronounce Velenarios. It's been very hard for me. So yeah, yeah, getting into it, maybe for people listening to this and they don't know anything about you, do you mind giving us a quick intro and probably just follow that with a sort of story of how you got here?
Sure. Yeah. So intro, the founder of ArDrive, and the ARIO network. ArDrive is kind of how I started in the ecosystem. I kind of grew into the ARIO network, maybe working backwards, right? ARIO is a permanent cloud, as we call it. It's a network of decentralized gateways that provide access to permanent data stored on ArWeave, as well as the ability to upload permanent data to ArWeave, right? ARIO, ArWeave, in and out. And it really goes beyond just uploading and downloading. There's a name system where you can assign friendly names to your data or identity. There's indexing components. There's ways to propagate chunks across the network. There's all kinds of tooling and other services that make up ARIO. And it's kind of grown into really this full kind of cloud services network, kind of like AWS, where you have a whole bunch of different capabilities that you as a developer can use when you're building a permanently hosted app. And the reason that we got into this is because I was building an app called ArDrive, an easy to use app that lets you upload, download, share your public or private documents that are stored on ArWeave. And we saw that there was only one access point. Actually saw a few different things, but the real thing that instigated ARIO is we saw that there was just one access point. There's just one gateway, arweave.net. And, we're going through this journey of telling people, oh, your data is going to be stored immutably on this blockchain, but kind of realizing that to get the data out, you really only had one spot to go to, and that was arweave.net. So, we had the idea for ARIO. And we wanted to make it easy for anyone to take this concept of a gateway, deploy it wherever, right? Whether in a big cloud or on the Raspberry Pi on your laptop, and just make it easy to get data out of the network. And in that process, we added a whole bunch of other stuff, right? The other big kind of hurdle that we had to cross in doing ArDrive was, when I started ArDrive, there's no concept of bundling data. On ArWeave, right? It's a layer one blockchain. There's 1,000 transactions per block. There's a block every 2 minutes or so. So you can imagine if you want to scale that and allow hundreds, thousands, millions of people to upload data, you needed to go way beyond just 1,000 transactions per block. So yeah, way back when, there was ANS 102, I think it was called, which was like the first, kind of rough bundling standard. We put that into ArDrive. It was JSON based. It was kind of rough. I think we put it into ArDrive in December of maybe maybe it's like December of 2020. So really early days. And then we took it out like the month after because it was like having, issues with performance and reliability. And then another bundling standard came along, ANS 104, which is the bundling standard that we use today. That came along, I think, in the summer of 2021. And yeah, that was back when Bundler Network was around, and they built the first bundler and really enabled the start of scaling uploads to ArWeave. And that's how we started getting down this path of, well, from a gateway perspective, if it's the ingress point as well for data, it should also have a bundler. It should also be able to pack all these transactions together and achieve mass scale for uploads as well. That's what gave us this idea for ArDrive Turbo. That was the first kind of bundling solution that we made. We built it originally for Meta for their Instagram project. They were uploading high amounts of data for their Instagram NFT platform, and we basically started with ArDrive Turbo as like a solution just for ArDrive to just enable credit card payments, and it really turned into this enterprise class uploading and payment system. And nowadays Turbo is one of the main ways you can get data onto ArWeave. So yeah, it really started with I got into the whole ecosystem, and it really started with just this concept of an easy to use app, and that lended itself to now making easy to use and easy to build with infrastructure, whether that's Turbo and bundling or ARIO gateways and all the services that they bring. And even kind of going back further now, like before I started ArDrive, my background was always in infrastructure architecture, enterprise architecture, that kind of thing. I did a lot with deploying big systems on premises, big systems in the cloud, mostly off the shelf products, a little bit of custom solutions here and there, but mostly things like Microsoft 365, or back in the day it was called Office 365, and rolling that out across enterprise companies. Did a lot with like document management systems. I was a big SharePoint guy for really most of my career. And SharePoint is like a collaboration platform. It's for like document management and workflows and all kinds of productivity stuff. There was a time where I did a huge email upgrade and talk about a highly used, highly scaled, but also boring kind of system is like corporate email. It's something that, and again, I haven't worked in like a big company in 5+ years. It's something that every company relies on, and like it's email, right? It should just work. You should just be able to open your mailbox and get it. But email systems, they can get very unwieldy and require many nines to operate, and migrating them from version to version, system to system. It's could be a beast. So, my career was in doing stuff like that. And then, I kind of discovered Ethereum in 2017, I guess. And that was when I was really like, oh, blockchain, that's pretty interesting. Because up until then, I really had just kind of saw Bitcoin and some of like the financial things around it, and it didn't really interest me too much, didn't click. But Ethereum was kind of the first thing that clicked for me. And, this concept of a world computer and anyone can participate and, bring in your hardware or your server, and now you're part of this network. I thought that was really cool. And, I started to mine Ethereum. I built, a big GPU rig, and, I did a little bit of ETH mining, a lot of like speculative altcoin mining as well. That all of those went to zero. I'm kind of kicking myself for a while. I was mining Zcash, and, I'm seeing some of the price action on that, and definitely kicking myself for selling those bags a long time ago. But really this act of like participating in the network, in the networks, is what, really made it click for me, on top of the other values of decentralization and, having sovereign access to data or finances and sovereign control over those things. I'm big into like running your own hardware, running your own server, and it just it all really clicked for me from there. And that's when I kind of went from Ethereum and these other like cryptocurrencies, and this was back when there was like the ICO mania, and I saw ArWeave was doing an ICO, and I couldn't participate because I was in the US. So I was like, all right, well, let's see if I can set up a miner. And it was really different than everything else because everything else was some kind of financial thing, or kind of technology that wasn't exactly tangible for me to use. But then I saw ArWeave and like, oh well, it's storage, and it's on a blockchain, and you just pay to upload the data, and it's there. There's no subscriptions, and it just it hooked me, right? It was so different from everything else that I was doing, everything else that I was building and working on at my day-to-day job. And the community was really small. My whole life I've been big into like online communities, mostly around like games and stuff like that, and like web forums and whatnot. But something else about decentralized technology and Web3, whatever, it's kind of community focused and oriented. So that was another thing that like, yeah, the tech was really cool, and it was like a small community. I felt like I was early. I felt that my voice could make a difference in it, and it's friendly enough, right? So that's kind of what all these factors led to me really going deeper and deeper with ArWeave. And it was like from 2018 to 2020 where it just kind of marinated, and I did more mining, and I tried building stuff, but I sucked big time as a programmer back then. I mean, really only good as a programmer now because of freaking AI tools. But I shouldn't knock myself too much because I certainly did a bunch of programming before AI tooling came out. But it's certainly a lot easier now than it was then. So all these things kind of came together over those couple of years, and that's 2020. Coronavirus came, changed the world, made a lot of people focus more inwardly. And I was like, hey, let's really try my hand at being an entrepreneur and building a business. And at the time, it wasn't let's make a decentralized network. It was just let's make an easy to use app that anyone can understand. And that's how kind of ArDrive and Permanent Data Solutions, the company that created ArDrive and started the ARIO network. That's when all that stuff was born. So I kind of worked backwards there in my journey, going from ARIO to ArDrive to like, all right, early experiences as a community member and miner. And yeah, I mean, my career was always in enterprise IT. I was a consultant way back when, like when I graduated college, I was like, I need a job, and consulting was like the only thing I can land. And yeah, I feel like now I'm consulting, but to the community, right? I'm like kind of a brand ambassador, and I do feel like I've been able to take that earliest stuff that I've learned as a consultant of like, all right, complicated technology thing, distill it to something that other people can understand, and don't be so heavy on tech and buzzwords. And it's been a long freaking journey. And I'm glad that it's not just about tech, and I can, talk to other excited people like yourself about what we're doing, right? Because that excitement was certainly not there for email platforms or document management platforms, right? Those are just like, they're a necessary evil for work, versus something that, in my opinion, permanent storage, all this stuff we're doing, could really change the world, and it's needed now way more than it was 5 years ago, I think. So I don't know. There's a long answer to your intro question.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. I think you've just covered like the whole journey. I think you went from the end to the beginning, sort of, and it's
Thanks.
interesting. And yeah, so I think hearing that, like going from enterprise IT to like now ArDrive, then the ARIO network and all that, I feel like there was sort of a shift there around the point where you started working on ArDrive. So what like was ArDrive sort of coming from a pain point, like, hey, I want to deploy something on ArDrive, or was it a weekend project? Or you really went straight in, like, hey, I want to put an application out there that other people can use and then deploy their stuffs on ArDrive and make it as easy as possible for like everyday users. What was sort
Yeah,
of the motivation behind?
it was kind of a combination of those things. And I mean, nowadays, ArDrive, it's like a publishing platform. It can do a lot more than just a Dropbox app. Um, but back then, it was like, even from like the earliest time at like knowing about Arweave, there was just always that idea of, all right, it's permanent storage, a Dropbox app that uses it. So, and in those kind of 2 years when I was still like doing my day job and learning about Arweave, no one had really built a good one. And, uh, you know, yeah, my day job was just dealing with tech that was either too complicated to explain to people or too boring, right? Like, and very stressful too. Like, I was definitely working really hard. Um, and I just wanted to do something that I could explain and had some excitement to it. And whether or not permanent Dropbox is exciting, I don't know. But, I just wanted like something that was retail focused, something that I could talk to my mom and explain to her in like 1 minute what I was doing. It also stemmed from like my own challenges with the internet. I've been around on the web for a while. I've seen things come and go. I've had old blogs disappear. I've had my OneDrive delete everything because it was stopped for a while, and when I turned it back on, there was some configuration change and it just wiped stuff. I've had hard drives die. I'm big into storing my own stuff, and hard drives die, right? They have a lifespan. So I always like respected the need for cloud storage, and it just seemed like an easy way to utilize permanent cloud storage. It was just a good idea. It still is a good idea. At the time, Forward Research, or I think they were just called like the Arweave team, whatever, back then, they were doing some incubators, and they were like, hey, if you come along and do this incubator, build an app, it had to have a profit sharing token, PST. I don't know if you remember those back on SmartWeave, as part of like the rules for the incubator. But there was a call for ideas and apps, and I bugged a lot. One of my close friends helped me figure out, like, all right, how do I make an app? How do I make a desktop app? Is what I started with. Really a command line app, which nowadays it's like all web apps. But I kind of nagged someone to help get me started with TypeScript and just understanding what even is a type. I remember it took me weeks to like just get those like basic things down, and why do you even need these things? And I think it was maybe a month or so it took me to like build that very first demo of ArDrive, of like, you have a folder, you put stuff in it, it watches for changes, it uploads to Arweave, and now you have a local like database of your transaction IDs, or a drive. And really thinking back, like, man, it took a week, or it took a month to do that. Something like that you can build in a day with Claude, right? So yeah, it was really a lot of things, seeing data disappear, wanting something different than my usual, like, complicated job, seeing a need, right? There's permanent storage, but there's no easy way to use it. And that was actually, it still is kind of the mission of PDS, is to just get permanent storage in the hands of everyone. So kind of all those things came together, and luckily the demo went really well. It's probably one of the most nervous days of my life, to like come out giving this demo to people and talking in front of virtual community, and something that I built, because I never really built anything of my own before. It was always off the shelf stuff, or sure, making scripts and whatever. But yeah, just kind of all came together, and we went from the command line app to, all right, now something with a UI, and just kind of progressed it from there.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I think I've watched that video and like a couple of other demos from the Open Web Foundry, and yeah,
Yeah,
they're just like really interesting. It's sort of like just people trying to figure out what ARIV is and what to build on top. Yeah, those ones were awesome. And also, I think you've mentioned something about data disappearing on the internet and all that. And so lately, I've been seeing this sort of trend on Twitter or X where like there's probably like this these people building a project and from nowhere they just disappear, and then you're like, hey, that data is still on ArRiv and will still be on ArRiv and can be accessed. I think it just shows how powerful that concept is, where it's like, hey, if there is a team that was building something and they're uploading that on ArRiv, even if they decide to disappear, you can always access that data because it's permanent. Yeah, and it's been exciting watching like more of those tweets. Like, hey, you can still access your data even if the UI that you are using is probably not there anymore.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's always going to be a thing. I've said before, like the internet wasn't built with a memory, right? It was built for convenience. It was built for speed. It was built to extract things from people, but it wasn't built with like a long term memory. And that's where Arweave and ARIO fit in. And yeah, in Web3, things move really fast. There's a lot of startups, small projects, so they come and go. Um, so in that context, it's even more useful to have a place for long term, preservation of data and sites and pages and all that stuff, because it is so fast and teams come and go. Let alone the positive impacts it can have in Web 2 and traditional enterprises, institutions, etc. Um, yeah.
Yeah, sure. And so thinking about the journey that you just told us about, I'm sort of wondering, was there like a single moment where you decided like, okay, I've built this ArDrive application. I now want to like create a company, like you created PDS, or was there like a sort of journey, like walk us through that time where you go from this one CLI app to creating a whole company focused on making sure like everyone has access to this permanent data?
So really, the decision was early on, um, probably not before the Open Web Foundry incubator, whatever it was. Um, I think it was after, but I was like, hey, if I'm really going to hire people, or if I'm really, going to make money, whatever, um, I'm in America. It's got to be a company. I didn't want to make a DAO or something like that. Even though I had participated in one um, really early on. It's called ARCA, Arweave Community something or other, an Arweave based DAO. Didn't have a great experience with it. Not so much like the people. All the people that were in it were fine, but it was just hard to coordinate a bunch of people who were kind of all had the same voting power. It was just really hard to get anything done. So, the Open Web Incubator, there was some angel investment, and I was like, okay, well, I have a little bit of money if I'm going to like hire people, if I'm going to, try to do things above board, and, you know, if I want people to, yeah, I guess trust me, I figured, oh, I need a company. And originally, I made like an LLC. Now there's Permanent Data Solutions LLC out there, and that's not the way to go. So I had some lessons learned there. I had to like unwind that and then make a PDS, C corp, whatever. So there's a lot of lessons there, and it's the kind of thing from being a founder that's like very unsexy work. Making a company and paying taxes and all that stuff. It sucks. But I wanted to not be like some of the other things happening in crypto, and I didn't want to be shady or anonymous. So I just figured it was a necessity, and yeah, hiring full-time employees, you have to be able to pay them from something and have a bank account and all that stuff. And the need for that company only became more and more important as we raised more money and that kind of thing. So um, after the Open Web Incubator, I realized, okay, well, I can't just have this janky command line app. Got to like build something with a UI. And again, like I wasn't great with, back end apps or command line stuff. I was even worse with anything with a user interface. So back then, there was another really skilled developer who's working on a similar project. His name is JY. He was working on a similar like Google Drive project. We joined forces, and he helped build the UI. And there's probably some of his code still in the ArDrive app today. He was the one who wanted to learn Flutter and Dart. So, all right, the ArDrive web app is still in Flutter and Dart. And yeah, I just needed to start relying on other people really early on. Nowadays, yeah, building UIs. I mean, I made the little Wayfinder app in a day, and that has an easy to use UI. And it's just crazy to think AI tooling can like really fill in a lot of those gaps. But back then, I had to really rely on other people and collaborate. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe a company wasn't necessary to do that, but yeah, that was kind of the path that I went down.
Interesting. So yeah, you just mentioned about like now building the ArDrive UI and all that. I just wanted to ask. Recently, I think I saw either a blog post or a tweet about sunsetting the ArDrive mobile app. Can you share about that, the idea behind?
Yeah. So ArDrive is written in Flutter, and Flutter is multi-platform. I don't know if that's the right way to phrase it, but basically one code base can be compiled into a web app, desktop app, and mobile app. And a while back, we had big dreams of getting it into the iOS store. And we really pushed to get the compiled mobile version to all work nicely on iOS and Android. And, lesson learned as being a founder, a few lessons in here. Back then, and I know they changed some of their policies, but Apple, the App Store, really difficult to get into it if you have any kind of payments, right? They want to take a cut, 30%, whatever. And this is one of the big lessons. We thought we were good to go. It was all working. We had it published into the Apple dev version of the store. And we're like, okay, this is going to happen, guys. I think we announced a date when it was going to be ready, or like next Thursday or whatever the hell we said. And we published it to the production store. And all of a sudden we started getting all more questions from them, mainly around how can they capture the fee. And this was, it was really, difficult to explain. Well, it's going to a blockchain. There's no middleman to capture the fee. And we didn't have any way to put some payment in there or whatever, right? We were just trying to get the ArDrive app as it was into the store. And the long and short of it was they rejected it. We couldn't get it in the store. We got it in the Android store. And, I think that worked well. But me personally, I'm an iPhone user, right? So that hurt me because I wanted to use the app on my phone. And so kind of took a lot of the wind out of the sails in terms of the mobile aspect. Now time went by, and we're a small team, and it was really hard to keep pushing on the mobile side. And it was hard for us to really build mobile specific features, right? Now you can have just a PWA of the web app on your mobile phone, and you essentially had the ArDrive mobile app. The only different thing we had in the mobile app was biometrics, so you could use your face to unlock it, which is nice. But we didn't really go the distance to add things like automatic syncing of your pictures or some other more native mobile things. We had all grand ideas to do that. But then we started building the ARIO network and kind of expanded our horizons a bit. So the app just kind of sat there. And yeah, whenever we would build a new version of ArDrive Web, that we had our CI/CD process, it would push a new version to the Android store. But it just started to get more and more difficult to keep up with the requirements, right? Every month or two, there would be new policies to have to agree to. There would be new data collection policies to agree to. There would be new packages that we would have to update specifically for Android. And it just got to be really difficult for us to manage for the small user base that we had using it. Apple relaxed some of their requirements for the store, and we're like, okay, well, maybe we can take another shot at posting it there. And we still were met with, a lot of questions about the payments, and even more difficult scenarios where you have to update the way we were building for the latest Apple App Store deployment process, and it just got to be a big time suck. So we had to make that difficult decision to say, we're just focused on the web app. Most of the user base uses it from the web anyway. So we archived the APK and pulled it from the App Store. So it's, it was tough to do that, but we felt that we kind of had to make sure we could still progress the web app without worrying about these challenges of maintaining it in a store. So let's not say we won't come back one day and put it back there. I would love to get it on the iPhone, but it's just that the policies of these stores are just really difficult to keep up with. You basically need a full-time mobile dev just for that. And we don't have that. So yeah, I don't know if you are an ArDrive mobile user. If you are, I'm sorry.
Not really, but I think when I started getting into using ArDrive, I was looking the first thing I did was actually to search for it on the App Store, and I couldn't find it. Then I was like, well, okay, let's just go with
Yeah.
the web app. And then
Yeah.
later on, I ended up seeing the blog. So that I just understood maybe there were some challenges. Or I think another idea that came to my mind was maybe the idea is now to have everything fully on chain, where the data is on chain and the web app is also on chain. I also thought that was a direction taken. But yeah, I
Yeah. I
think
mean,
there was some
it's
other.
definitely the direction. And, one of, I think, the harder parts, maybe not hard parts, but the big consideration, especially for mobile. And one of the reasons why people use iCloud and OneDrive and Dropbox is you generate a lot of data from your phone. At least I do. I take a lot of pictures, a lot of videos. When I take a picture, sometimes it's 5 or 6 different pictures of the same thing, or I'll take a video of something, and some of them are really good special videos. Some of them are not. Some of them are really long, and the first 50% of it is not the good stuff. So when you have that in combination with permanent storage, something that's really there for data you want to preserve for a really long period of time, and have the provenance and have it be on chain, all that stuff, it's a harder sell when you have something that's just uploading everything, right? You really need more intelligence, more curation for it. And that's why, all right, a web app, you have that curation. Sure, you can drag and drop a whole folder of stuff in there, right? But it's easier to be more conscious of what you're uploading, what you're spending, what you're doing with it, versus an app that's just anything you do, it just uploads it. So that's not to say we couldn't have built some intelligence to it, right? To somehow know this is 5 of the same photos. We recommend just doing one. But yeah, it just got to be that kind of question too. And one of the reasons why, it's hard for us to invest in all the things and make everything an awesome experience, you know?
Yeah, I think with like on-chain data and basically anything on chain, you sort of have to consciously make that decision. As just you just said, like photos and videos, there are some things you basically don't want to like live forever. And just with any type of data, there is data that you want like temporarily. So for anything to go on chain forever, you need to like sort of be involved in that decision making. And I think the web app sort of enforces that by default, where like if you're uploading something to ArDrive, you know what you're doing. Like it's a conscious activity, and
Yeah,
you've made that decision and filtering. Yeah, which is I think it's a trade off to make, in my opinion.
it is. It is. Yeah.
So yeah, I think moving on, the just in my experience when I started looking into like RIO and all the amazing stuff you guys are doing there, the first thing I saw was obviously the website, and I just got a bit curious about like the first page I saw, where I think it's the first permanent cloud. I think that's the highlight there. Can you elaborate more on that? The idea behind the permanent cloud, and yeah, what is being built on in that regard?
Yeah. So we did a lot of thinking about how to explain RIO to people. Um, right. On one hand, it's a decentralized network of gateways for uploading and downloading and indexing, and it's a CDN, and it's all these services, right? Um, and we wanted to find a better way to describe all that. Um, and we're like, okay, well, there's a lot of teams that have branded their networks as different things. So part of it is we didn't want to call RIO something that's somewhere else, right? There's a lot of things that say they are some kind of cloud. There's a lot of clouds, right? Um, but we're using ArWeave, and the backbone is permanent storage. And we've taken some of those aspects of permanence and applied them to things on RIO, like domain names and hosting apps, right? Like you can permanently buy a domain name, and those funds go into, we call it a protocol balance, which pays for the hosting of that and resolution of that domain name for indefinitely, right? So we kind of borrowed, not borrowed, mirrored some of that permanent, some of the permanent nature of ArWeave into the network, and the fact that it's, you know, kind of the layer below, it really lent itself to, okay, well, we're a cloud network of different operators and different hardware and different services, but it's based on this key concept of permanence. So we're a permanent cloud network. Um, and I see the internet as being a superset, I think that's the term, of all of the clouds, right? You have the internet, and you can maybe divide that into, and I've called it like the tempo web or like the non-permanent web version. And that has clouds. That has AWS and Google and GCP and insert many of the cloud providers. And then you have the permanent web, right? And that could have different permanent clouds in it as well, right? We're the first one. That's not to say there aren't other permanent cloud networks that come out in the future. And the permanent web is built on that primitive that is ArWeave, permanent data storage, right? It all starts at the storage level, I think. Um, so yeah, that's, you know, there's a lot of thinking, writing down different words. You know, what is RIO? How do you distill it? How does it not have baggage? How do we make something that's our word? Um, and yeah, permanent cloud network, I feel like fits it very well. And it lets, hopefully, when people hear that, they think of, at least technologists, when they hear that, they think of other cloud networks like AWS, et cetera. And oh, well, there's a permanent version of that. Okay, I get it. So yeah, that's kind of how that came to be, and the vision for permanent cloud and the permanent web and all that stuff came behind it.
Interesting. So getting down to the I'll call it the core component of the ARIO network, which is a gateway. And like just looking at, I've been like looking at how the gateway work and the composition, and it's just a lot of things at once, right? Like, so can you try to like probably simplify a gateway like in the easiest terms possible?
Um, it's a web server, and it it's a bridge to ArWeave, right? So um, it's got a few different services that it runs, right? So it's a cache of data. So when you, for example, upload something, it'll cache it. So it's really fast to get it out, and it'll cache it immediately or optimistically. And that's because data on chain can take a little bit longer, right? For something to be on chain, it has to get mined into a block, confirmed. And if you're building an app that's on the internet today, I mean, who likes to wait for their file after they upload it? You know, that's just the expectation of people on the web today. So the gateway is responsible for, caching all the stuff, whether it's something coming in or if it doesn't have that data, it's responsible for finding it either across the rest of the ARIO network or on ArWeave itself, and then it'll cache it. So it's kind of like a CDN in that regard. It has the capabilities to interface with the ArWeave network and some of the, those core protocols like fetching a wallet balance or the price of storage or block information or chunks, right? Whenever data is actually stored on ArWeave, it's distributed or divided into chunks. If you have a movie or a PDF or a picture, you upload that, it's divided up. You go to an ArWeave node, especially if this is now layer 2 data that's kind of been bundled up. That ArWeave node doesn't have that contiguous version of the file. So the gateway in this cache has that. So it's like that first access point to get your information in a highly performant manner. It also has an indexing piece, and that's how you can find data, right? It uses GraphQL, so you can make a query and say, I want to find all the stuff from this wallet, this owner, or all the stuff by this app tag. And all of that is fully configurable by the gateway operator, so they can choose what they want to index and what not. And that's what really helps lower the barrier of entry, right? So you can run a small scale gateway that doesn't have to do all of the things, right? You can just decide, I want to index this data, or I want to run a bundler, or I don't want to run a bundler. So you can kind of mix and match these different services. The gateway also acts as kind of like a domain registrar, or maybe that's not the right word. A domain name resolver, right? So one of the key things that we realized making the ARIO network, and really it came from me just sharing, I don't know what I was sharing, a document or something, uploaded to ArWeave. ArWeave is the blockchain, right? So everything is denoted by a transaction hash, right? And your wallets are denoted by a public key. And these are unfriendly things to share. And they're just not made for humans, right? There's a reason why we have names for each other, so we can recognize one another and communicate. So we saw, through sharing these long, ugly links, that there was a strong need to just make like friendly names for them, right? Like imagine the internet today if we only had IP addresses for things. Imagine if you went to google.com and you had to remember the IP address for google.com. Imagine if you were like, hey, send me an email. And your email was Murdy at an IP address. Names are like fundamental to the internet, the tempo web. So, we saw that names were going to be just as important for the permanent one. So ARIO gateways act as a resolver for these friendly names to the data or identities that they represent. And now that kind of starts to tie into the incentives for running a gateway. So it's not just a node, it's not just a web server that you deploy and you could build stuff on it or have that sovereign access to permanent data. You can do all of that just great. But we wanted to build an incentive to do that. So you as a developer aren't forced to also run the hardware. There's benefits of doing it if you're a developer, but you shouldn't be forced to do that. So that's where, RNS and this incentive protocol that we built come into play. And that's not something that you get necessarily when you're running infrastructure in AWS. It's the opposite almost, right? You're only paying AWS. They don't incentivize you. Well, maybe they do with like free credits and stuff like that. But there's no like real incentive, real protocolized incentive to use them or to have other people like put their hardware into AWS for you to use. So that's where like, okay, you do something like buy an RNS name that pays into a protocol that now pays out the gateway operators to resolve and serve that RNS name. So it's not just a web server. It's a web server that kind of pays you to run it, so to speak. So that was actually a really long answer and not a short, simple one. But I hope it made sense a little bit. And there's even more pieces to the gateway as well. But yeah, it really does a lot. If I had this one diagram, I can maybe share it with you later that just shows all the different things that are in the gateway. And that comes back to it really being like this full cloud network, cloud services network. And not just a, one trick pony isn't the right word, but not something that just focuses on one thing. Like ArDrive, for example, that is just focused on one thing, permanent storage. And that's perfect. That's exactly what we want. The primitive, the fundamental thing, the foundation, it has to be laser focused on that or else everything else kind of falls down. So, ARIO really fits in a lot of those gaps with, ready-made services that you just turn on. It's not a smart contract platform. It's not something where you can just write your own decentralized Lambda function or something like that. And it's like that on purpose, right? We wanted these ready-made services that you just turn on or off and have some incentives baked in. And I think there's 600-ish gateways already joined. I know we've been talking about you running a gateway at some point, getting better, coverage around the world. And yeah, it's, the thing that really powers that permanent cloud.
Yeah, I think like before we look like starting to look like into the how like the gateway works, I wasn't really like understanding the real like power of the gateway. But then when you start looking deep into it, you realize that it does so many things just to make sure like uh, uh, it sort of does what ARIO is, which is like ARIV. Is it in ARIV in out or ARIV input output, something like that?
Either
One
one.
of the two.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like okay, the core idea is like this gateway is sort of literally your front door to ARIV. But then there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes, and I think it comes down to how ARIV is set to be, which is just to have permanent storage. But then there is no sort of incentives built in to recover that data, right? It's I think I was at a conference and I gave this sort of idea, and I think I got it from somewhere on the internet. I can't remember from which talk, but it was like, imagine you have your data that you're trying to give to someone like, hey, I want you to keep my data. And this person has space to keep your data, but they are only incentivized to like keep that data. So if you come back and you tell them, hey, I really want to like have a look at these items that I gave you from my house to keep for me. They are not
Yeah,
incentivized to like start searching for them and all that. So you need to have like this other person who is like, okay, I know where that data is. I know where the bed frame is. I know where the TV is, and I can bring everything back to you just as you gave it to this person to keep. But that's not the role of the person who keeps it. Their only role is to make sure those things are kept and they're secure somewhere. So I think
yeah,
like the ARIO layer is like this sort of person making sure they know where everything is. And I think that has to do with indexing and then caching in order to retrieve everything later to have the same speed that as almost anything else on the internet. So there is a lot
yeah,
happening with a gateway to just make sure users have this smooth interaction with ArDrive.
yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. Arweave nodes, um, they have to provide access to the data, um, but really only to other Arweave nodes, right? And that incentive is kind of based on like BitTorrent like mechanisms. This kind of tit for tat. I'll give you the data if you give me the data. Right? Arweave nodes can only mine more blocks if they can prove they have access to the historical data. Um, so they kind of have to share data, but they don't necessarily have to do it in a performant way, and they don't necessarily have to do it to end users, right? Technically, they don't even have to share it with ARIO gateways, right? But that's where ARIO gateways are also providing the data to miners, right? And they're intelligent about how they fetch it, um, and they provide that additional cache level so that if you do want to access it, or if a bunch of people want to keep accessing that data, they'll come to the gateway to cache it. And likewise, the gateways, have to have this free level of access, or else they won't get the reward either. If we just introduced X402 payments for accessing data. And one of the big reasons for that is just the economics of bandwidth. If you have a big video and that's getting shared amongst tons of people, there's no protocol in the world that will offset the cost of bandwidth for petabytes upon petabytes of download. There just isn't, and that's what happens when you have like something with an uncapped kind of resource like bandwidth. So we introduced X402. But even that, if a gateway says, hey, you're going to have to pay for everything, then basically you will not get any of the network reward, and you'll actually get kicked out of the network at some point. I think it's like 30 epochs or something like that, 25 or 30 epochs, where you just get booted and your tokens are slashed. So it's like kind of finding that balance between free and paid for. We don't want to recreates some of the traditional shortcomings of the tempo web. I'm a firm believer in free access to information, but we want the economics to also work out. You shouldn't be forced as a gateway operator to have to spend a ton of money because more people are accessing a certain NFT picture. And that's also where this concept of like location independent data, verifiable location independent data comes in, right? You have something like Wayfinder where you can go across the entire network and get what you're looking for. You don't even have to rely on just a single one, a single gateway. And that picture, that movie, that app, whatever it is the same no matter which gateway you go to. And that's just something you fundamentally don't get, or it's a lot harder to build and get on AWS, GCP, et cetera, those other clouds. So I think that's another very powerful thing that ArWeave ultimately enables is this location independence and the fact that you can verify the thing, right? Coming back to your example before, you store something with a person and they're like, okay, yeah, maybe I'll give it back to you in the future. How do you know they didn't tamper with it? Right? Your bed or your book or whatever it is. Right? Like with ArWeave, you can like verify that. You can verify that it's still actually stored on ArWeave and it hasn't been tampered with. And that's just another thing that ARIO gateways do to make it really, or they make it a lot easier for you to verify it. Right? They're hashing the data. They have their own internal verification, and they're providing all this information for users to either trust or verify it themselves. Right? You kind of have both options. I know that's you've dug pretty deep in some of the Wayfinder stuff, probably deeper than I have. So you're probably familiar with some of the routing and verification things that it can do.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think actually one interesting thing when I was, I think this was probably 4 or 5 months ago. I was very skeptical about like the like location independence of the data. Where like, hey, if I have this one transaction ID, I can resolve that through all these gateways, and it's the same data. I think the first time I truly like heard about that concept, I had to try around 60 or 65 gateways. Just I got tired. I'm like, yeah, maybe if it's the same across these gateways, then maybe it's true. And then later on with like Wayfinder, you start to understand how like things work behind the scenes. And I think it's a very exciting topic that people don't really know about yet, or many people don't know about yet. Whereby I think the same happened with, I can't remember, but I think there was a preview of AO that were accessing through one gateway, and that gateway was blocked, I think, or not working. And then someone just jumped to the AO Discord. They're like, "Hey, you know what? Actually, this is a very good use case for this location independence.
Yep.
That code base or that data is on ArIV. You can just switch the gateway and it will work." I had to switch the gateway and it worked, and like it was just interesting to see it live and like see how it works and how it happens.
Yeah.
So I think that just leads me to the next sort of question I had, where like I think like if from at least from my perspective, it's like the RIO team has been building these sort of like blocks to kind of get us close to the perma web, as I think about it as like it's a journey to the perma web, but we're getting closer each day. And so as I've been going through, I just went through stuff like from end to the beginning, where it's like Wayfinder, then you have RNS, then you have the gateway, like you just go down the ladder. So I'm wondering, has this all been sort of on a map from the beginning, where you're like, hey, we have to build this, then this other thing? Or it has been like, okay, now we have, for example, we have like these 500, at the moment 600 plus gateways, but then everyone kind of goes to like the same gateways. So these other gateways are not sort of being utilized to their full power. Maybe we need to build something on top of that to make sure we utilize all these gateways. Like, how has that been?
I would say maybe a combination of both. Some things have been mapped out or envisioned from when I started ArDrive, right? It was really like, okay, if ArDrive is a permanent app, and all the data on it is permanent, what are all the things that have to be available for that to stay that way? Way back when, ArDrive, the web app, wasn't even deployed on ArWeave, right? Because it wasn't easy to do that. So it's like, how do you ensure the app functionality still works and all the components that make it work? And again, ArDrive is a good example because it uses pretty much most of the things that a common app would use. I don't think it's so specialized where it uses just a certain thing that that is uncommon. I mean, technically, ArDrive still uses some SmartWeave stuff, so that we need to fix. but from way back when, it was always like, all right, for ArDrive to keep working, we need the fast cache. There has to be some index that needs to be easy to upload. It has to be able to scale. Um, so there was always like a map to make sure those things were good. And then some things kind of came along the way, like RNS. That was never in any kind of initial roadmap or anything. Wayfinder was another where it was like, okay, this location independent stuff is cool, but there's only one gateway. So what's the point of AR:// if it's just a find and replace of rweave.net? There's not actually other gateways that are doing the thing and doing it well enough where it'll work. And don't get me wrong, you use Wayfinder, you'll go to plenty of gateways that are really slow or have issues, right? It's by no means perfect. But if you are if one gateway is blocking you or censoring you, or not necessarily a gateway blocking or censoring you, if your ISP or your country is doing those things, yeah, it's really easy to get to that same data or app somewhere else. And protocols like Wayfinder make that happen. And that now comes into play for like NFTs, for example. So many NFTs have hard-coded URLs into one specific location. And you really need protocols to ensure those still work if that one location is unavailable. So it's like, yeah, some things were kind of mapped out, some things weren't, and we've kind of like discovered the need for it along the way. I'm sure there will be more, but ultimately, there's only so many things I think you need to create for a permanent cloud, right? Before you just get into the realm of building things without really a problem. Like we're only trying to accomplish so much. We're not trying to make power plants. We're not trying to, build robots. We're trying to enable the permanent storage and of access of that data, right? So I do think, it is a finite set of things. But yeah, there just comes time where you're like, oh, well, you're doing this. You realize, well, to accomplish this, there's this thing that you have to do. And I think as an engineer, it's really easy to find more things to build. Sometimes we got to control that, I think. And it's especially hard when we're in crypto, Web3, and there's all exciting stuff. But, we do have to focus on the things that matter and try to not get distracted with, shiny thing syndrome. But yeah, I don't know. I think there's still more on the map, right? We have our cloud map, we call it, with other things that we are trying to accomplish, some in kind of the short or medium term, some that are more on the horizon. And the things that are further out, maybe we get to them, maybe we don't, right? Like we're still trying to have a long-term vision, but I think we've accomplished a lot of what we need to make this permanent cloud work. And case in point, you were saying before about Wayfinder, and yeah, you really do get to the same data no matter where you are across all these gateways. So it's kind of juggling those things, building stuff with the right purpose and not kind of veering off track.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting that way to see some of these things like playing out in the ecosystem in a sense that, for example, most of I think early builders used to hard code like their stuff. For example, it's something.arwiv.net. But then lately we've started seeing a shift like towards Wayfinder, like using Wayfinder. And I think I find this interesting in a sense that if at the end of the day we're going to build these decentralized applications that live on this like on that decentralized cloud, and you in a way you can't modify anything later on, so you might as well just build in this mechanism where we're trying to reduce the error rate on the apps. For example, if you have an app and I've built this app, I've left it, I'm no longer working on it, and I hard coded a gateway like arif.net. In a sense, I'm sort of like blocked somewhere, But then if I'm using something like Wayfinder, I have the rules set depending on like how I'm thinking about it. The app will still run, right? If you have something like, I don't know, with Wayfinder, if you have like a random routing strategy, you're at least sure that that can always work because that will keep choosing different gateways every time. And then you move forward, you can access your app using different gateways. So it sort of builds into this idea of applications that can outlive us without maintenance, in a sense. And I
Yeah,
think that's one of the things that excited me a lot about
yeah.
Wayfinder,
Well,
like
it
diving
definitely
into that.
takes. You're exactly right. Like there's ways, there's patterns that you have to use if you really want to make your permanent app stay as permanent or work as long as possible, right? Because it will stay permanent, but will it keep working, right? So, like my point I was talking about earlier with ArDrive and the app stores, right? And how it became like really difficult to keep up with the changes for an app store. Um, Technology progresses. There's new libraries that come out. There's new ways to build things. If you create an app and you deploy it to Arweave, but you're depending on some package that's hosted on some CDN somewhere, and then that goes down, is your app still going to work? Right. So there's a lot of things to consider to like really build something for the longest term possible. Um, that'd probably be a neat guide or something like here's how you make an app to outlive you, because it is more than just, unless it's like a really simple static site HTML that's nice and self-contained. It's hard to build a complicated complex app with no external dependencies, and whether it's using Wayfinder or not, like it involves a little more a shift in your thinking. um, so yeah, it'd probably be a neat any guide or something that we can make, or I don't know, how to really make your app unruggable. Maybe we already have a guide like that and I don't even know. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that will be something like that probably. And it's just interesting that I think it was like 2 years ago. We have a conference in my area called East Safari, and I think I went there like two times back with the same sort of presentation, and this presentation was how to make like truly decentralized applications, and it just felt like a guide that I was seeing the applications that are there, and then I'm like, are we really building dApps, or we need to like shift the thinking and all that? And these are things that really take time. And also recently, I think it just probably the right time to ask about this. I did a talk, and this talk was called "Still Not Decentralized at the Front." So it was like more about how we're building applications, and we've forgotten this front end layer that we need to decentralize at some point. And then I think the response from the audience was this excitement, like, "Oh yeah, I think you're actually right. There is a need for this." But then, how do you actually like build with that mindset from the beginning? In a sense that you have this application, for example, let's say I have one application, but then I deployed one version with a sort of a bug. I can update that, but the previous version is still working. It's still on the promo web, and it can still be accessed. So, like how do you sort of work around those types of errors? And I couldn't figure out an answer. I was like, well, I think we need to
Yeah.
like shift in some way. We need to shift how we think about these applications and how we build them to a certain extent, to a level that, yeah, if you get into like those types of scenarios, you might find a way to like work around that. So I just didn't have like a straight answer. It was sort of a gray area, and I think
Yeah.
that's still a gray area with this permanent data in general.
Yeah. I mean, it's so you hit on an interesting point. Like, what if there's a bug? Um, can see that as like two sides, to, like the bug. Um, if it's like a critical security flaw, exposing private information or something like that, yeah, it definitely requires more care and attention before deploying real sensitive things. Like I said before, we didn't deploy ArDrive to Arweave until, I don't know, a couple of years after we made the ArDrive web app. For that exact reason, we were concerned with, well, what if there's some issue and if we put it on Arweave, now it'll be there forever. So there's definitely care that will have to go into ensuring apps that deal with sensitive information are properly vetted, and especially if you're dealing with encrypting data, that's another like kind of squishy area for permanent storage, permanent private storage, right? You wouldn't want to think you're encrypting something in a certain way and it's actually not, right? Maybe you're using the wrong cipher or whatever. It's not encrypted correctly, let alone having an app that's permanently deployed that's incorrectly encrypting data, so there are those very real considerations. At this point, we've released so many versions of ArDrive. I'm sure some versions of them, I know some versions of them do have bugs. Not serious encryption bugs, but maybe some bugs that, I don't know, maybe a certain thing doesn't apply the right content type, or there's a bug with syncing, or all of those are still there, right? But we're able to add new ones. And with RNS, you can have a mutable pointer to whatever app version you want, right? You can actually, if you really wanted to, you can have under names with each older app version. So on one hand, sure, you could potentially release bugs, but the positive side is now your users could always go back. Maybe you released a new version of the app that users don't like. You changed the algorithm, you changed the UI, you changed something, and you have some user who's like, "Oh, I don't like this. I like the old version." Right? Like you have that version history of every single deployment. So it's kind of like a feature in that regard that every version will always be there. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. The smart app developers are going to ask these questions, right? Well, what if this happens? If my app's not ready, you shouldn't deploy it. Plain and simple. I would not say, oh, it doesn't matter. Your first alpha version, if it's dealing with really sensitive stuff, you want to make sure it's the right time. That doesn't mean you can't do test versions or get your RNS name and like kind of secure the spot. But it's really important to make sure that things are in the right order. If you're doing sensitive stuff. And there's plenty of non-sensitive apps where, your first version of it, go ahead, let it rip. It's almost cheaper to just let it rip and deploy it versus, oh, now I got to get some temporary hosting provider and get a domain name and do all these other things just to get your app in a good spot. If it works on your local host, if all tests are passing, it's so cheap to deploy a small app, right? And again, we're just talking about like front ends, right? If you need a back end, that's a whole different story. That's where you can leverage platforms like AO or other smart contract networks, or hey, even a centralized server somewhere that your decentralized front end communicates to. And that's a whole other like shift in thinking of like, how do you make permanent back ends and how do you make sure those services stay online just as much as your front end does? So we could probably have a whole separate talk on like these kinds of technical topics. And I'll be honest, I don't think I fully understand the perfect ways or the perfect approach to do these things. So it's, it's something that can always be improved upon.
Yeah, sure. I think I'm excited to see like how over the years people will approach this issue and like the type of solutions they'll come up with, because I think not every app can just like switch from this sort of centralized version to a decentralized version. There are things you need to make sort of trade-offs. And for things like if you have to deploy an app on something like ArDrive and your app had like some sort of environment variables on the front end, you need to think about that. And yeah, I'm excited to see where like these sort of guides come out and what people think about that and the improvements there. So moving forward, I think this was a week or 2 weeks ago. I saw a tweet about like revenue of the network kind of being broken down and how things have been evolving. So I just wanted to like know how how does that feel? Because I think we've been in mainnet for just about 10 months or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, a bit of reflection on that, seeing those numbers and how the ecosystem is all growing.
Yeah. So, I mean, on one hand, could always wish revenue numbers were higher, right? But on the other hand, I feel pretty darn good about it. You know, we spent such a long time in testnet. We spent such a long time crafting the white paper and ensuring stuff like RNS, the prices were good and the demand factor worked, and gateways joining and leaving and delegated staking and like penalties and all this stuff. We spent such a long time trying to make sure that was right. And then we launched the network, and we kind of saw it all get used. Right? We went such a long time in testnet where tokens were free, and we weren't sure, like, are people really going to buy names? And we would love to see more names bought for the sake of like your identity. That's something where we maybe don't see enough of. I did a Twitter post the other day about that kind of thing. Like, oh, did you know you can, send tokens to your RNS name, right? Like, I do feel that anyone in Arweave or AO, for that matter, should have an RNS name, if anything, just for their wallet, right? Right, because not everybody has or needs a decentralized web app or site. But seeing the revenue come in shows me that stuff like the demand factor is working, and people are buying all types of names, permanent lease, they're upgrading names, they're assigning primary names. All these end up in as protocol revenue. We haven't seen like a one character name get bought or anything like that, and those are super premium, so I kind of expected that. Hopefully we do. And yeah, it shows like the economics of the system are working. Because what we didn't do, for better or for worse, we're not like just giving out names. Sure, there's been some like key contributors here and there where here's some Turbo credits and go buy a name. And then ultimately what we do with Turbo is anytime someone buys a name through Turbo, we go and buy ARIO tokens. But it's really been like organic growth. There's been no big giveaways. We haven't padded or pumped those stats. We could, but we're not. So it's showing that people are spending real money on this thing, on this very new small cap network. They're spending real money on it. And, we deliberately decided to give out 2x the rewards for the first 12 months to gateway operators. And that was because, we wanted to ensure, people were more incentivized to join and set up their gateway in the first year of the network. So we deliberately, through the protocol, juiced up the rewards, and those will taper down after month 12. So I see the amount of revenue coming into the network, if the rewards weren't doubled, would essentially be the same revenue getting paid to gateway operators. So it's not like we're ending up in this unbalanced system where, gateway operators are essentially only getting paid by, the initial Genesis rewards. right? They're actually getting paid by real fees, by real income that the network is earning. So of course we want more names to be bought. And we have plans and ideas to do that in 2026. And we have the RNS marketplace coming out, which should give name holders another means of kind of some speculation on aftermarket sales. But it's showing that we kind of have a balanced system that just kind of organically started or organically grew. And yeah, there could always be more fees and more utility for the ARIO token, but this core, RNS core name system is doing what we had kind of designed it to do. We're not really seeing anything different. So for better, for worse, right? So it's kind of validating that it kind of worked as planned. Knock on wood. It's working as planned, and we just want to see more growth and get more adoption and really make it the standard across Web3. To your point, decentralized front ends. We really feel that RNS and ROE, this is like the best place for that kind of thing, hands down. We just got to keep promoting that to other chains, other teams, and not just other Web3 teams, but I think even enterprises, institutions, even Web2 still need a friendly name for whatever they might be permanently storing. So that's another thing we're going to try to explore more in 2026 is kind of try to bridge the gap with those kinds of teams. And we already started to scratch that surface a little bit. Teams like Criminology Consortium, their archive of criminology journals is being backed up to Arweave and has a name for their site. And even an index of their data also has an undername. So it's just the way to find your site or information. I think it's working out good. I'm happy with it, but again, also could always want more.
Yeah, sure. I think it's pretty exciting to see how like things are growing, buying names, seeing the number of gateways increasing. I think those are podcasts I was watching like 11 months ago, or actually 4, 5, I can't remember. But there was 200 gateways on the network, and just from that time, in less than a year, we've gone from like 200 to 600. That's very interesting. And also, I think another use case that could be just broadened for RNS name is, for example, if you have something like I don't know, let's say there is a company that has this UI and they have their own. Let's take an example of Uniswap. So you can have like uniswap.ar.io or .any gateway that you want, and then they could assign sort of undernames to their contracts. Like you have V4 the Uniswap, something like that, and then this can allow like other developers who want to integrate with the latest contract to not start looking for like that long contract ID. They could just say, oh, okay, if I go to contract underscore Uniswap, I'm guaranteed that I always find the latest contract ID. And I think this could also be integrated with AO coming, like AO processes, where you can just assign that, and then other UIs can just go to that one name that they can easily remember. So excited to see where like
Yeah.
those types of experiments lead.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really clever idea. I've never thought of that, right? Yeah. I mean, RNS names are pointers to data, they're pointers to identity, they're pointers to AO processes, right? But they can also be pointers to other smart contract IDs. Whether that's like, an undername pointing to just a text file with the contract ID in it, or literally assigning an undername with the contract ID. So there's maybe variations on that. I actually did see there was some version of Uniswap deployed on Arweave. It didn't have a name. I don't know who deployed it. Here's where it's like you need names to almost like, I know trust might not be a good word to some people, but having a name that you trust can be really helpful, right? Because then you see the name Uniswap, any undernames are owned by Uniswap. You see some random transaction ID. You don't know if is this like the Uniswap, the actual version. Again, it's just like domain names. If you go to just some IP address, do you really know it's Google? Does Google control that thing, or whatever? Insert some domain name. Um, so yeah, it's a pretty neat idea. If you're from Uniswap and you're listening to this, reach out. We'd love to help explore that one with you.
Definitely, yeah. So I think shifting a little bit back from everything tech, I've noticed guitars like in the background there. Can you talk a little bit about those ones? Are you collecting them or they have a
Um,
story behind them?
no, not really collecting. We're like just have accumulated over the years. One of them is the acoustic one isn't even mine; it's my wife's. But the rest are mine, and I have a drum set back there too. Um, there's probably a point in my life where maybe like other people, you kind of have a path you can take, and maybe one of those paths was musician. I've been in a few random bands here and there. Nothing really ever took off. I've written a lot of music. It's all on ArWeave, on ArDrive somewhere. I'm sure I made a post a long time ago with some links if anyone was daring to find that. You can tell I play a lot of like metal music and stuff. Um, I don't know. I feel like it's maybe the same part of the brain, but different pathways. If you're looking at like programming and creating music, I really feel they're very similar. One, you're writing harmonious code or servant microservices that work with each other, and okay, you can be in a team and you're all working on that same code base or app, versus a band and you're writing harmonious notes and playing different instruments, bringing different things to the table there. And sure, some bands might have a really strong frontman or person, whatever, who writes a lot of it, and the rest of the band fills in. Some protocols or apps have a really strong lead who does a lot of it, and the rest of the team kind of fills in the gaps. So I do, yeah, so I kind of see myself, I had these two paths, but they kind of converge in one way, shape, or form. I don't really play much guitar nowadays. They're very much just a fun background. I play a ton of drums. Definitely, it's like my thinking time
Interesting.
is sitting on the drums and playing a lot of metal and fast beats and stuff. I recommend it to people, anyone who's like, you play instruments, it's good to play a song, but I really like to work through problems in my head while I'm doing it, and it's fun too. But yeah, um, you play any
So
music?
here's the real question: are we going to ever see a villainous set of drum at any of these Arif events, Arif Day, Arif Asia? Is that going to happen one day at some point?
You know, I'm sure there's other musicians in the ecosystem. If people wanted to play, I would totally be down to play. I don't know if I could just go up and just play by myself with no music, just the drum solo. I don't know about that. I don't know if people would enjoy it. It'll just be, 3 minutes of like wailing on stuff. Um, but that would be a lot of fun to do something like that, an after
Yeah, I mean
party,
that.
a bar, I don't know, this little stage.
Sure, that could be a very nice side event to like probably a Reef Asia or something like that. Since yeah, so maybe one day we never know.
I'll play any kind of music, really. I know I'm big into metal, but I will play any kind of music. So even if it's just some electronica, just four to the floor, like anytime I'd be down for it.
Interesting. Yeah, I know I promised this was going to be an hour. I kind of see we've gone
I
like
just
an
kept going
hour
on.
and 30 minutes. Yeah, it has been very interesting. And also like just learning about your journey and picking a little bit of your brain here. So I think just sort of a closing question, as I don't want to take that much of your time. So what are the things that you're excited about in the ecosystem or for like the coming years? So I think this is how. Let me just restructure the question a little bit. Since we're building for the permanent web that will most likely outlive us 100 years, 200 years from now, What are the things that you're excited for or you're excited about in the next 20, 50 years? I think from a level of probably RIO and everything that PDS is building, and from a personal level as well.
Um, I mean, a bunch of stuff, really. So, I am on like a long time horizon. I'm really excited for big advancements on like storing data, right? So there's been a lot of like, oh, well, we can use DNA or we can etch on some exotic material. I think it's only a matter of time before those kinds of technologies are like actually commercialized. And that really cements this concept of permanent data, right? If now you have massive storage capacity that anyone can have in their house, I mean, that's really good for the permaweb. Another thing that I'm excited for, but also a little scared about is just quantum technology. I think that'll be really interesting. We've thought about that a lot as it relates to ArDrive. ArDrive has permanent data, permanent private data. So does that mean if a quantum computer comes along, it'll just break all the ArDrive encryption? The way we built it, we use AES-256. It's quantum resistant. I don't think that is the same as totally quantum proof. So I see it as like, if people break my private ArDrive data in 30, 40, 50 years, that's fine. But that might not be the case for other private sensitive data. So I'm interested in quantum proof encryption algorithms as it relates to permanent storage. I've dabbled in it a little bit, trying to come up with something that could be used. There's still even bigger questions and problems, though. Like if there's a quantum computer, all right, the data on Arweave might be quantum proof, private data. But what about the chain itself, right? Your wallets, right? Bitcoin, Ethereum, like there's massive effects that quantum computing would have on technology. But I think that's something that could change the world. Maybe in a shorter horizon, next like year. I'm really excited for AO to fully, be hyper beamified. I know the team has been working really hard to get rid of the legacy, not get rid of, but migrate from the legacy infrastructure and ultimately get rid of it. And get some of the new advantages of AO Core and Hyperbeam. We've been working through that ourselves and ensuring the ARIO network token process is all kind of hyper-beamified. I'm excited for that to get wrapped up, and then we can go beyond just hyper-beamifying things and potentially try to leverage like trusted execution environments. I think that's something that can also be really powerful for the whole like verifiability story. If you can know that a gateway is operating in this kind of environment in a T, you really have provable outputs of anything that the gateway is doing, that it's running the exact code that you think it is. So that could be really cool for stuff like Wayfinder to now not just route you to a gateway, but know that, oh, this gateway is, being serving its data from a TEE and, using this commit hash, and you have, you can trust now that everything the gateway is doing is being executed correctly. So I think that could have interesting effects. And the other thing I'm just really excited for, I was talking about before, is just like bridging this gap with traditional institutions. Like I was saying before about my journey with PDS, like our mission was always to get permanent storage in the hands of everyone. Sure, that has involved building lots of tech and making it real. But we want to keep getting it into the hands of everyone. Internet Archive just had another outage today and made a little snarky tweet about it. It's clear that the current systems that we have on the web today are just not built to last. And I really think ArWeave and ARIO can really help, right? Whether that's just storing the data for really long periods of time, providing the provenance and verifiability of that. I think we need it now more than ever. So next year we're really trying to push harder on like the institutional front, and I'm excited about that. Also, maybe a little nervous because what if they all say like, we don't need this, right? But ArWeave has been around for 8 years, right? And I think next year it'll be its eighth birthday. So that's a pretty long time for crypto. That's a long time for technology. So I'm excited to really bring it to some new markets and get some good feedback. And maybe we have to build some new things to make it work for them. But yeah, I'm definitely pumped up for that. And the community will have to stay tuned for some things, some ideas we have in that area. And yeah, I don't know, just kind of rattling off different things now. It's also
Yeah,
excited
sure.
for AI stuff too. I mean, AI I know is really important, but I also kind of feel it's a little bubbly right now. So that's why I'm not going to go into the, oh yeah, I'm excited for AI and robots to take over the world.
Yeah, I think I saw can't remember. There was a robot that was released like a couple of weeks ago that was costing like $20,000 or something like that. And people are like, okay, this doesn't look like what it says it is. And I think
Yeah.
that has been the problem with a lot of like this AI-ish type of presentation. They're like, okay, this is what you'll get, but in a year or 2 years from now. And people are like, uh, I want
Yeah.
something that like really works right now. So there is a lot of speculation around AI. But
Tons.
again, yeah, I think there is a really good sort of, I think something I'm excited about regarding AI agents, X402 and ARIV, is the idea that for example, like when these AI agents just get to mainstream maybe, and these LLMs, and they're pulling data, for example, from ARIV, and so if I have my sort of data set, I can assign this like I can assign a UDL to my data set and say like, hey, for you to access my data, I need this one-time payment, and then there is also like I think I'm not very sure. I think this has been integrated already. I saw something like that. Turbo being integrated with X402. Has that been released? Yeah. So like maybe the AI is using that under the like behind the scenes. Then they
Yeah.
could make the payment and to like fulfill the UDL requirements. Yeah, I'm excited to like see those sort of intersections there.
Yeah, that would definitely be pretty interesting. Onto your point around Turbo using X402, let's just say very soon. Um, but yeah, like looking at licensing and tying that with royalties, right? That could be pretty powerful. Agents pulling data and yeah, paying the gateway for the bandwidth for it, but maybe that data has a license. And maybe that license, actually, I know that there are licenses that say like you cannot sell this data unless you attribute the creator. So now it's like tying the gateway and kind of not necessarily token gating something. I mean, that would be even a different path, like, oh, you must have a certain NFT or some token to access this. But saying like, yeah, you can pay me this and I'm going to profit share or revenue share with the creator of that thing based on the UDL license or whatever kind of license. So that's definitely an interesting area. And maybe like the one other thing that I'm not sure, come back to your question on like the map, right, of like permaweb or whatever. The one other like big thing that's just not in the permaweb right now, and I don't know if it'll ever get here or not, is advertisements. So that's another thing. Like we've thought about, like how does that fit in to the permanent cloud? How I don't like seeing ads. I know there's a lot of people who use ad blockers and stuff like that, but that is another way to fund things, fund the operations of an app or of infrastructure. So I don't know how that's going to manifest itself yet. I'm not saying we would be the ones to do that, but that's another like thing it's not there. There's no ads in ArDrive or any permaweb app. At least I've never seen an ad. I've played around with it in Rome. I don't know if you ever tried Rome. You can do like 50
Yeah.
clicks through. It's like your permaweb ad here. I've never like deliberately like gone further beyond that. But yeah, that's
See,
another.
I was going to ask about that because, I think like that was like last Sunday. I literally spent the whole day just like going through Rome, looking at the types of data people are uploading, and
Yeah,
occasionally I could see the ad. So I was wondering, I'm like, how is this
yeah.
coming around? And when you just talked about ads, I was going to ask you. I thought that was implemented already, or that was just a sort of placeholder
It
there.
was just kind of a what if, I had all grand plans like, oh, well, maybe people could pay for ad space. And then you have like the other questions that follow. Well, how do you do that in a decentralized, permissionless way? How do you ensure that these ads are shown on this DApp on any of the gateways, right? Something like Google Ads, it's location dependent. You have
Yeah.
to plug in what URLs you want the ads to be shown from, right? So like, yeah, it's just it would be a whole other thing to have to figure out, and you know who's going to pay, who who would pay to get their ads placed, right? There's a lot of questions around it, but it's clearly a big part of the tempo web that has not yet made it over for good, and I think for good reason. Ultimately, again, I hate seeing ads, but they are a way that many things get funded. So
Yep.
yeah, we'll just have to see how that evolves, if it evolves. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we'll get back to this podcast 30 years from now when that is already
Do it.
there. And so yeah, I think, yeah, that's just the end of sort of the questions I had for today. And
Okay.
hopefully we get to another chat where we can go deeper into like some of these stuffs. I'm excited to explore deeper some of these things.
Yep.
Again, thank you very much for making the time. We're now close to 2 hours. Thank you very much for taking the time to chat. This
I had
was
fun.
an interesting, awesome episode. Learned a lot. And so, yeah, excited again to have you one of those days so that we can go deeper into some of the new things that come in the ecosystem. I know there are many things being built out there, probably more alpha coming from the ARIO team and other people in the ecosystem. So yeah, excited to see that when they come out. I'm also very excited to see the marketplace when that comes out. I've been waiting for to see how that enables like this secondary market for RNS. So yeah, excited to see when that comes
Yeah.
out.
Yep. Yeah. Us too. It's been a long time coming for that, and appreciate you having me on. Glad we got to talk for a while. I definitely had fun. I hope I wasn't too boring, and yeah, we can chat again
Yeah,
soon.
not at all. Thank you very much, Phil, for coming to the Archive podcast. And yeah, see you around on Twitter and other places as Vilanarius. Hope
Oh,
I'm
there it
pronouncing
is.
that right.
Right.
Yeah, and for anyone who want to see some of the things coming out, some of these tweets about RIO, permaweb, and everything, you can follow Phil on X. He goes as Vilanarius. So yeah, Phil, once again, thank you very much for joining us.